The Four Noble Truths are the foundation of the Buddha's teachings. These four deceptively simple insights are in fact so profound that you can spend a lifetime understanding just one of them. The Pali word for truth, saka, also means reality, or that which is actual. So the Four Noble Truths are not philosophical claims to believe in or accept. Rather, the Buddha taught them as scientific truths. The Four Noble Truths represent objective, fundamental aspects of reality that the Buddha realized when he awoke. To not know these truths, he said, is to sleepwalk through life, repeating the same mistakes, unaware that they bring suffering. But it is no coincidence these four truths are called noble. To hear them is already the first step on a path that one day will bring you to become an awakened one, a Buddha yourself. So, let's explore the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha and see how these ancient teachings can enrich our lives as sentient beings wrestling with the mystery of existence. Before we dive in, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel. The first noble truth is that life is full of dukkha. Now, what is dukkha? Most people translate this Pali word as suffering, but this is only partly correct and can be misleading. Suffering is a very strong English word that we use on rare occasions. We might say we've had a stressful day at work, that we're angry about losing our headphones, or that we regret not talking to our crush back in high school. Life is full of such unpleasant experiences, but to call them suffering is a bit of an exaggeration. The Buddha meant these kinds of things with dukkha, but he also meant so much more. For example, losing your keys is dukkha, but so is losing a loved one. Regretting your choice for lunch is dukkha, but so is regretting 30 years of a bad marriage. Hitting your toe is dukkha, and so is having a lifelong trauma. The point is that dukkha can be translated as suffering, but also as dissatisfaction, discomfort, stress, or unpleasantness. All these things are dukkha, but dukkha is none of them. Dukkha is a much deeper word than any English translation can convey. It is a word used in Buddhism to denote a profound reality of life, namely, that we never really get what we want. And even if we do get what we want, we always end up losing it one day. This is the first noble truth of Buddhism. But not only unpleasant things are dukkha. The Buddha tells his disciples that even pleasure, both material and spiritual, is dukkha. The pleasure you experience during an orgasm is dukkha. The happiness from seeing your child born is dukkha. Even the pleasure of learning the Buddha's teachings is dukkha. Why? Because none of these things ever lasts. Think about it. Whatever happiness and pleasure you attain in life, whether material or spiritual, it will all be gone one day. And when it is gone, it will leave you with the pain of being separated from it. Thus, all the happiness and pleasure you find in this world contain the seed of dukkha within them. And you will experience this dukkha, if not now, then later. This is not an opinion, but a reality of life. You see, the first noble truth of Buddhism is much deeper and darker than most people realize. It says not only that there is unhappiness in life, but also that what we believe is happiness is only a delayed form of unhappiness. Pleasure is only the mask of pain. Achievement is only the mask of disappointment. Happiness is the mask of dukkha. Now you might say, wait a minute. Sure, happiness always comes and goes, but so does unhappiness. Why did the Buddha focus so much on dukkha and not also on its opposite? Isn't this unfairly pessimistic? To this, I would answer, please be patient. We are only at the first of four noble truths, after all. I would also say that there is some virtue in focusing on life's dark side. After all, dukkha is the universal problem facing all sentient beings, at all times and in all places. In his great book, What the Buddha Taught, Walpola Thero writes, "One physician may gravely exaggerate an illness and give up hope altogether. Another may ignorantly declare that there is no illness and that no treatment is necessary, thus deceiving the patient with false consolation. You may call the first one pessimistic and the second optimistic. Both are equally dangerous, but a third physician diagnoses the symptoms correctly, understands the cause and the nature of the illness, sees clearly that it can be cured, and courageously administers a course of treatment, thus saving his patient. The Buddha is like the last physician. But what did the Buddha do after he discovered that existence is full of dukkha? Surely a lesser mind would collapse into nihilism here. After all, if everywhere you turn there is only dukkha and more dukkha, what point is there in anything? A Western nihilist would recommend taking one's own life, but for the Buddha even this is not a way out. The Buddha was, after all, certain of the reality of rebirth and the law of karma. To take one's life as an act of violence would only result in a far worse subsequent life, where dukkha is even more intense. So trapped in this endless labyrinth of dukkha, what could the Buddha possibly do to improve his situation? Well, he did what he advises us all to do. He pointed his trained mind singularly at dukkha. He looked and looked and he looked deep. And there, right in the middle of dukkha, he discovered the second noble truth: thirst. The second noble truth is that the cause and origin of dukkha is thirst. The Sanskrit word for thirst is trishna, and it is no coincidence that the English word sounds so much like it. Thirst actually derives from trishna, and both mean the same thing. So what did the Buddha mean by thirst, and why did he see it as the cause of dukkha? Well, think of all the bad experiences you've ever had, no matter how big or small. A breakup, a car accident, a failed exam, a funeral. No matter how different, these all have one thing in common. In each case, you wanted your experience to be different from what it actually was. This is thirst, the fundamental desire for reality to be different than it is. Now, pay attention. It is not thirst for the wrong things, but thirst itself that creates dukkha. A monk thirsts for enlightenment, a lover for his beloved, a woman thirsts for a child, a Wall Street trader for a bigger paycheck. One man thirsts out of love, another out of hatred. The specifics don't matter. Thirst is always the origin of dukkha. Whatever we thirst for brings us dukkha because we don't have it. Even if we get what we want, it is never as good as we imagined it to be. Even if what we attain is as good as we imagined, even if it's better, it still never lasts. The roads of desire are many and winding, but they all lead to the gates of dukkha. And it gets even worse. Thirst is an addiction. When our desires bring us dissatisfaction, we don't give up on them. On the contrary, we feel that only desiring and attaining yet other things can bring us lasting happiness. Of course, this never happens. Every desire comes with the promise of a better life. But desire is like the mythical monster Hydra. Cut off one of its heads, and two more spring up in its place. Every desire is the fuel for yet more desire, until we are all aflame in the fire of dukkha. In the fire sermon, the Buddha says to his disciples, "All is burning, monks, all is burning." Now, the Buddha distinguishes some desires as better than others. For example, the desire to become a better, more responsible person is more productive and less harmful than the desire for alcohol. But as one moves along the path of awakening, one must learn to detach from even one's spiritual ambitions. The amazing thing is that the Buddha designed his teaching so that one needs to learn all of it through hard and long practice, and then one should let go of it entirely. The Buddha expresses this in his famous simile of the raft. He describes his teaching as a raft you use to cross a dangerous river. But what should you do once you reach the distant shore safely? Do you take the raft with you and carry it around? Of course not. This would only make it harder for you to go further. It is the same way with the Dhamma, the teaching of the awakened one. At first you must put great effort into learning it, and it will save you from a lot of suffering. But once you are advanced enough, it will only impede your progress to stay attached to teachings, concepts and practices, even those taught by the Buddha. A frequent criticism of Buddhist doctrine is the following: if desire is so bad for you, why do Buddhists tell you that nirvana is so desirable? Isn't the desire for awakening also a desire? The Buddha would respond to this that there are skillful and unskillful desires, but also that even skillful desires should be discarded once they've done their job. Desire is like an infection in your mind. You need to treat the infection if you want to be healthy. But the cure for this infection is another infection, a kind of antidote. That antidote is the desire for awakening, the desire to help others, the desire for love and compassion. But the Buddha would say that this antidote is also dangerous if overused, and that you should also get rid of it once it has done its work. As the Buddha says, "My teachings are a guide to the truth, but they themselves are not the truth." Of course, one cannot let go of all desires and thirst immediately. Thirst is our constant companion, and it follows us even on the path to awakening. There are stories of monks who abandoned the spiritual life after several years of practice because they became disappointed. After many years of hard practice, they still could not reach enlightenment, so they became frustrated or even angry with the Buddha. But the problem was not that their practices were wrong. It was that they still held on to their spiritual ambitions, and those ambitions were a huge source of dukkha. You see, the Buddha teaches that your path is yours alone, and it doesn't matter how far others have gone in their practice. There is no good in comparing your progress to that of others. This can only distract you. If others have achieved more, you should be happy for them and inspired by them, but you should not be envious of their achievements. The moment you start worrying about others, you are thirsting again, and it is only going to bring you more dukkha. So, we see how the Buddha is diagnosing the cause of the problem of dukkha. The cause is not the universe or the people around us. It is inside us, within our own minds. But what are we to do? If the Buddha had ended his teaching here, the truth of dukkha and thirst would still be valuable, but we would be lost. After all, what would be the point of understanding the origin of suffering if there was no way to stop suffering? So just as he carefully diagnosed the disease, the Buddha also discovered the cure. And that cure is the third noble truth, the truth of cessation. The word cessation in English means the act of stopping something. And that is what it means in Buddhism as well. In this case, the act of stopping dukkha and its cause, trishna. The Buddha tells us that the end of suffering is possible. But for us to understand what this means, we must first have a correct understanding of the third noble truth. You see, when people hear about the third noble truth, they often think it is a kind of escape from this world. People hear about cessation, and they think it's some kind of spiritual death. They imagine it as a state of total nothingness, like a deep sleep, with no thoughts or feelings at all. After all, if the goal of Buddhism is to get rid of all desire, wouldn't that also mean you get rid of everything else too? But this is a misunderstanding of the Buddha's teaching. The third noble truth is not about getting rid of life, but about getting rid of the suffering in life. It's about purifying your mind of all its unwholesome qualities, of all its ignorance and hatred, so that you can experience the true nature of things. When your mind is purified, you can finally see the world as it really is. You can experience peace, joy, and wisdom that are not dependent on anything outside you. This state of mind is what the Buddha calls nibbana, or nirvana. Nirvana means blowing out, as in the blowing out of a candle. In this case, it's the blowing out of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. But what is nirvana like? The Buddha said that it is beyond words and concepts, so we cannot describe it in any way that does justice to its reality. But we can say what it is not like. Nirvana is not a state of nothingness, nor is it a state of eternal bliss. It is beyond all dualities and categories. It is beyond existence and non-existence, beyond time and space, beyond birth and death. It is the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth. It is the end of all suffering, the end of all thirst. And it is accessible to everyone who follows the path to awakening. But how do we reach nirvana? How do we stop suffering and achieve the third noble truth? This brings us to the fourth noble truth, the truth of the path. The fourth noble truth is the Buddha's prescription for the disease of suffering. It is the path that leads to the end of suffering, to the cessation of dukkha. The Buddha called this path the Noble Eightfold Path. It is a set of 8 interconnected practices that cover all aspects of life: moral conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. The Noble Eightfold Path consists of right view, understanding the Four Noble Truths and the nature of reality; right intention, developing the intention to renounce attachment, ill will, and harmfulness; right speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, and helpfully; right action, acting ethically and compassionately, avoiding harm to others; right livelihood, earning a living in a way that does not harm others; right effort, cultivating positive states of mind and overcoming negative ones. Right. Mindfulness, being aware of the body, feelings, mind, and mental states. Right. Concentration, developing deep states of mental absorption and focus. These 8 practices are not meant to be followed in a linear order, but rather simultaneously and in harmony with each other. They support and reinforce each other, creating a holistic approach to spiritual development. The Buddha compared the Eightfold Path to a chariot with 8 wheels, all moving together toward the same goal. If one wheel is missing or broken, the chariot cannot move forward. In the same way, if one aspect of the path is neglected, progress toward awakening will be hindered. The Noble Eightfold Path is not just a set of rules or rituals, but a way of life. It is a practical guide for living a life of wisdom, compassion, and inner peace. It is a path that can be followed by anyone, regardless of their background or beliefs. The Buddha taught that the path is open to all, and that anyone who sincerely follows it will eventually reach the end of suffering and attain nirvana. In conclusion, the 4 Noble Truths are the essence of the Buddha's teaching. They provide a profound and practical framework for understanding and overcoming the suffering that is inherent in life. By recognizing the reality of dukkha, understanding its cause in thirst, realizing the possibility of its cessation, and following the path to its end, we can transform our lives and achieve true peace and happiness. The Buddha's teachings are not just philosophical ideas, but practical tools for personal and spiritual development. They offer a way out of the cycle of suffering and a path to awakening and liberation.